Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. And thank you to Micah Connect Africa and Micah Global for the invitation for Msingi and for I to have this conversation. My name is Carol Nganga. I am the founder and team lead of Msingi Africa. Msingi makes the connection between faith, justice, advocacy, and activism. And our goal is a Kenyan church pursuing justice for all. We aim to bridge the justice gap in the church. So before we begin this conversation, which I've titled it, Let My People Go, Advocacy as God's Tool for Freedom and Liberation, I'd like us to listen to just a brief intro on who Msingi is.
What does social justice, activism, advocacy, and the Christian faith have in common? Is pursuing justice at all levels a spiritual discipline? How do we influence church leaders and Christians to advocate for justice and fight injustice? How can churches become the first line of defense for the socially unprotected? Msingi is a movement of people spurred by their Christian faith to answer these questions about social justice, advocacy, and activism. Msingi believes the church can be empowered to redemptively advocate for justice for the most oppressed, for those relegated to the fringes of society, for the disempowered, and those without access to power. In his inaugural sermon, Jesus spoke about those on the margins of society, about their freedom and their liberation. Pursuing justice is at the core of being a Jesus follower. Justice and righteousness is the foundation of God's throne. Msingi's name, call, heart, and bold mission, holding true to the tenets of the kingdom. Our faith propels us to seek justice and spend ourselves on behalf of the poor. Justice is their shield and defender. At Msingi, we are about connecting the struggles that we all face. We are creating safe spaces to converse about social justice, curating content that enhances justice conversations, and in this way, uniting the stand for social justice and for advocacy. Engage the content. Join in the conversations. Connect to the movement. This is Msingi.
I want us to go together on a journey. We'll be reading from Exodus chapter 3 from verse 7 to 10. And then Exodus 5, verse 5. I have seen how my people in Egypt are being mistreated. I have heard their groaning when the slave drivers torment and harass them, for I know well their suffering. I have come to rescue them from the oppression of the Egyptians, to lead them from that land where they are slaves and to give them a good land, a wide open space flowing with milk and honey. The land is currently inhabited by Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The plea of Israel's children has come before me, and I have observed the cruel treatment they have suffered by Egyptians' hands. So go, I'm sending you back to Egypt as my messenger to Pharaoh. I want you to gather my people, the children of Israel, and bring them out of Egypt. Then Exodus 5, verse 5. Afterwards, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. Let my people go so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness. Let my people go so that they may worship me. So it does seem that freedom and liberty from oppression is directly linked to how we come to God. Liberation and worship are tied. This reminds me of Psalms 137. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we thought of Zion, our home, so far away. On the branches of the willow trees, we hung our hearts and hid our hearts from the enemy. And the men that surrounded us made demands that we clap our hands and sing. Songs of joy from days gone by, songs from Zion, our home. Such cruel men taunted us, haunted our memories. How could we sing a song about the eternal in a land so foreign? while still tormented, brokenhearted, homesick, please don't make us sing this song. And so in this chapter, we also see that worship and liberation are intertwined. We cannot sing songs of joy when we're still in captivity. So for liberation to happen, there needs to be a people, a person that says and shouts, let God's people go. These are the activists. These are the advocates. Moses was the advocate, the liberator chosen by God to be the mouthpiece and the leader of this liberation movement. There are many different definitions of advocacy and different levels of advocacy, of the advocacy process. Many of these definitions are contextual and therefore representative of the people or organization doing the advocacy. They express the desired outcomes of the advocating society and group. So Kame defines advocacy as the sustained effort by civil society organizations and corporations with other like-minded groups or individuals for systemic peaceful change to policy or other conditions which affect people's lives. So we see that advocates are able to identify issues and policies that affect people's well-being and then mobilize themselves in fighting for and appealing against these policies and rectifying the issues that are at play. Advocacy is not just about getting to the table with a new set of interests. It's about changing the size and configuration of the table to accommodate a whole set of new actors. Effective advocacy challenges imbalance of power and changes thinking. That's from an author called Veneclasen and Miller. In this definition of advocacy, we see advocacy that wrestles with power structures, policymakers and policy influencers, and seeks the inclusion of previously disadvantaged voices in the decision-making process. Many people are not aware that the situations that they find themselves in can be rectified and thus become complacent and reluctant to engage. Therefore, advocacy can be used as a tool that creates awareness for people. Through advocacy, people are able to see a different perspective and they see that their situations can change if they make the right steps towards tackling the issue. As change agents, advocates should initiate a process of critical awareness building. They should set in motion a dialogue on the realities of the local situation and so enable the people to identify their own needs and problems and express what kind of changes they want and how they would like them to come about. Advocacy is the process. So we come to a definition that I really love from Alexia Salvatierra in Faith Rooted Organizing, a book that Msingi has done a few trainings on. So her and Peter Helsel define advocacy as the process of calling on leaders to make public commitment to use their power in ways that respond accurately and effectively to the needs of those affected by their decision. And so we see that advocacy and power are intertwined. So these definitions make me think about that a lot of the crises that we handle as churches and NGOs could be completely erased if governments did their job. A lot of prayer requests we have are as a result of failed government, political and social economic system. A lot of our charity interventions are as a consequence of failed systems. Charity is helpful and necessary. It is first aid, but we all know first aid is done and needed during an emergency and needs to be followed by proper medical intervention. Maki Ashe van Stenwyk says, charity is injustice. Charity accepts the status quo. When we do charity, we give out of our affluence to help the poor. We don't actually sacrifice our affluence to destroy the distinction between the rich and the poor. We mustn't settle for charity when justice is required. Most of us have moved from charity to community development. What then would it look like for us to incorporate advocacy into the work that we are doing? Could we perhaps consider what government responsibility is in your areas of focus and work hand in hand with other stakeholders to ensure that government does its part? Do we know the charters, the legal frameworks, and the constitutional mandates that are sector specific to the intervention that we are involved in? Have you considered that your role as a faith leader in government meetings goes beyond the opening and closing prayer, but you can influence government policy by offering your recommendation based on the experience within your field and influence policy that will mean long-lasting change for your beneficiaries? We consistently have said that learning how to fish is better than receiving fish. However, as Alexia Salvatierra and Peter Helsel tell us in Faith-Rooted Organizing, knowing how to fish, however, is not of much use if there's a wall around the fish pond and the fishermen are not allowed to access water. They continue to say that community development strategies reach beyond mere charity to engage people in solving the problems in their neighborhood. What does not typically get addressed by such strategies are the barriers created by unjust policies, laws, and social structures. Community development will not stop air pollution, fix a broken immigration system, or ensure the availability of health insurance for workers and their family. Sooner or later, those engaged in community development will hit a wall. Transforming a community requires more than neighborhood development. It demands courageous organizing and persistent strategic advocacy. I believe that churches and faith-led organizations are best suited to be spaces where advocacy is birthed, incubated, and strengthened. This is because, one, God's kingdom is established on justice and righteousness. Psalms 89:14, where Msingi gets his name, says that it is in the DNA of our faith to seek liberation and freedom, not only from spiritual oppression, but social, political, economic oppression. As a second reason is that as churches, we have the numbers and political power. Every Saturday and Sunday, millions gathered to hear God's word. Imagine if this was used to explore what holistic freedom looked like, and then used our numbers to lobby for freedom. You know, that freedom in full kind, the one that Jesus said he came for? And we have the infrastructure, big and small, that can be used for liberation. And so I'd like to offer a model that I have seen that has really taught me and influenced me in how I'm doing my work at Msingi. And these are justice centers. In 2017, just as I was wondering how the Msingi journey would begin, a friend invited me to a place in Mathare, the Mathare Social Justice Center. The Mathare Valley is located in the Eastlands of Nairobi, Kenya. It is the oldest and second largest urban slum in Kenya after Kibra. I went, and upon discussion, they welcomed me, a Christian, to explore ways we could work together. Upon discussion, they gave me space for free to host the faith-rooted organizing training. This place, in many people's heads, would be the most unlikely meeting place for pastors and activists to meet because of how radical the organizing that has happened in this space is. However, we met in this space, started our faith-rooted organizing classes, graduated a team of faith and justice leaders, and inspired an imagination within the center and the entire social justice movement that faith can be integrated in mainstream pursuits of justice. This happened for 3 years until COVID-19. This space is in the community and is open for all. This space welcomed me. It was Msingi's first home. And I must add that most of the justice activists always say that churches charge them to do organizing, to meet in their spaces, yet for them, they've always given these spaces for free. Mathare Justice Center was until recently part of the Social Justice Centers movement. The Social Justice Centers movement is an umbrella body that brings together grassroots community social justice centers from across the country. The movement was founded during the Saba Saba March for Our Lives campaigns on July 7th, 2018, to connect the struggles of different communities, initially from the urban slums of Nairobi, Kisumu, Vihiga, Kakamega, Busia, Kilifi, and Mombasa, but has since grown to onboard peri-urban and rural communities and populations of different diversities. They currently have 80 social justice centers based in 20 counties in Kenya and 12 social justice centers in Uganda. They seek to promote social justice, which include efforts to tackle issues such as poverty, exclusion, gender inequality, unemployment, human rights, access to social justice, and social protections. The organic movement was birthed from the community, and every social justice center has a different focus based on the justice need within the community. Some advocate for water rights, others against extrajudicial executions, others against environmental degradation, but all have one driving force: the local felt needs. The growth has been at most times spontaneous and organic, a whole lot like how churches have historically grown. So what lessons can we as faith-based organizations and churches learn from the social justice movement in organizing for advocacy? The first one I suggest would be rights-based approach to organizing. The social justice movement spends time reading, analyzing, and popularizing any new laws, amendments, etc. that impact on the well-being and the dignity of the people. Global charters, country constitution, and the Bible reiterate the rights of human beings to live in dignity. Most of us do not know the legal instruments that govern those we serve. We are mostly caught unawares, and when our voices are heard as churches, and I will say this, and I will say this openly, it is only when we are speaking out against abortion and homosexuality. Do we know the rights of the widows, the refugees? Do we know that young men in informal settlements in Kenya barely live to maturity because of alcoholism and extrajudicial execution? Does this extreme income inequality in our countries, in this world, call us to advocate for the year of Jubilee, as in Leviticus 25? The second way I would suggest is invest in justice and liberation. Justice and righteousness is the foundation of God's throne. The very core of our faith requires and mandates us to be about justice as much as we are about righteousness. We preach half the gospel when we don't preach and fight for justice as believers. I have been invited into countless meetings equipping me in advocacy from the non-faith perspective. This is what has been called political grounding. Thomas Sankara is quoted as saying, "A soldier without any political or ideological training is a potential criminal." As churches and faith-based organizations interested in development and justice, what is our equivalent of political grounding or training? Are we investing in learning? What do we become when we do not invest in learning as we fight inequality, oppression, and injustice? Most of these activist leaders that you see in the media are as a result of intensive activist political school. They are always learning and applying the learnings and relearning again. I know of very many political schools in Africa and globally that young cadres go to learn political injustice in organizing. Intensive lessons on justice and liberation are taught. If it is so that half of God's kingdom is about justice, are half of our budgets about justice? How much are we investing in grounding for justice? In our churches, in our conferences, in our theological institution, Sunday school trainings, youth ministries. What would the continent look like if the body of Christ took justice seriously? Every Monday on our Msingi Instagram, we ask this question. What about justice was preached in your church this past Sunday? We have received less than 5 answers from the time we started our weekly question. I just wonder how many responses we would get if I asked about righteousness. The third thing the third lesson we would learn from the movement is local agency. As shared before, this organic movement was birthed from the community, and every justice center has a different focus based on the justice needed within the community. Now imagine with me for a moment how our countries would change if the local church also served as a justice center. The local church and local expressions of our organizations could be agents of justice in communities if we invested long-term in them. Many pastors and faith organization leaders daily come face to face with the fruits of unjust systems. They themselves are victims of unjust systems. We need to help local faith and organizational leaders with the skills to identify oppressive systems and offer solidarity as they cry out and advocate against them. We need to create collective communities of courage that offer us a safe space to faith leaders who go against the status quo. We have very many needs that come into organizations and churches that could be solved by advocacy and activism, and they could be solved for good. We need to pray for courage to face pharaohs who want to keep people in bondage for their own gain. Let us learn to listen to the cries of the people in bondage. Let us learn to join in the cries of the people. Let us weep with those who weep and then rise up and work for their liberation. You only hear when you're in proximity, and then we are called to address the root issues, not just the manifestations of it. And this begs the question, who are we in community with? So we go back to Moses for a bit. Moses liberated people all the way out of Egypt. It wasn't just out still the Red Sea. It was till he could not go further with them and had to hand them over to Joshua. Let's go the long haul. Let us brave the climb and go upstream. This takes intentional incarnation. You have to be about the people with the people. Incarnation is intentional and it costs. We have to have presence in the community that we are serving them. Listen to the cries of the people in bondage. You only hear, I will repeat again, you only hear when you're in proximity. And we need to address the root issues and not the manifestations of it. And so we need to also sit with a few realities of ourselves. Our churches cannot remain closed all week long while the youth have no place to go. Yet when we call them, we expect them to hear us, and we are complaining about drug abuse and thievery and all of those ills. We invest in mortar and brick with state-of-the-art buildings, but do not invest in people at the same level. When all is said and done, when do we think of the people, and how do we invest in the personhood and the liberation of the people? Our NGOs cannot only be charity focused. We have to ask ourselves harder justice questions. What injustice is being done for this need to keep recurring? As Desmond Tutu says, at some point, we have to stop pulling people out of the river and go upstream to find out who's throwing them in. My community development teacher, Dr. Nadine, told me that the task of a community developer is to work themselves out of a job. I am meant to do my work so well in the communities that I am in, so that I am no longer needed. Could it be that we fail to go upstream because if we were to solve the problem at the root, we would no longer have our jobs? What is the implication of this thought at the local level all the way to the multinational, international relief organization level? Who benefits when there's poverty and injustice? Me, you, the oppressors, the drug lords, the corrupt government, neo-colonial countries and systems? Our churches and offices cannot be the only green, beautiful spaces, while children in the community have no playgrounds, or worse still, when churches have grabbed the only public land spaces in the community. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victims. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. That's a quote from Elie Wiesel. I will repeat it again. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. I would like us to go back to the Exodus liberation call. Let my people go so that they may worship me. Could it be that we are still worshiping in Egypt? When we look at most of the social, economic, political realities, most of the songs we are singing are not songs of the free. We keep asking people to sing happy songs while in captivity, while our country's souls keep saying, please don't make us sing this song. Could it be that we could be many Moseses here in this recording, listening to me, tasked with liberation but afraid, doubting our capacities, looking at our personal history like Moses, who killed an Egyptian and ran away, our inabilities and physical limitations. Moses was a stutterer. Could it be that this is where Aarons, who walk alongside the activists, are called to rise, who are committed to liberation and walk hand in hand in battle, who are ready to be on the front line of the pursuit of justice? Could it be that we could be the people, the churches, and the organizations that are the incubation spaces for true freedom and liberation? If so, how then shall we live? Amen.